5 bikers roared up to Tom Randall's pristine suburban home, their engines growling like beasts. They defaced his spotless white walls with graffiti, trampled his carefully tended flowers, and smashed a plaque reading Patriot of the Year 2005 against the ground. The gang's leader smirked as he taunted, "What's the matter, old man? Where's your glory now?" Confident in their power, they didn't expect any resistance. But Tom just stood there, calm and silent. Little did they know, one phone call was all it would take to turn their day upside down. Let's start from the beginning. Tom Randall, a lively 68-year-old widower with a sharp wit and a quiet charm, stood in front of his modest suburban home, meticulously trimming the hedges that bordered his yard. His hands moved with the precision of a craftsman, each snip deliberate and careful, as if the shrubs were his masterpiece. The house behind him was spotless, its crisp white walls gleaming in the soft morning sun. His garden, bursting with bright blooms, framed the scene like a painting, and the American flag on its pole swayed gently in the breeze, completing the picture of idyllic suburban life. Tom was the kind of neighbor everyone loved. Need help fixing a broken faucet? Tom's your guy. Want the secret to a flawless apple pie? He'd share it, along with a funny story from his past. He was the friendly, dependable heart of the neighborhood, a man whose quiet life seemed as steady as the seasons. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, there was a part of Tom's story that no one in the neighborhood knew. The peaceful morning was shattered by the deafening roar of engines. 5 motorcycles thundered down the street, their riders revving their engines obnoxiously before screeching to a halt in front of Tom's house. The gang dismounted, their leather jackets gleaming in the sunlight, each one adorned with menacing patches and symbols. The leader, Clay, was a towering man with a thick beard and a swagger that screamed trouble. Clay stepped forward, a sly grin plastered on his face as he eyed Tom's picture-perfect yard. "Well, look at this," he said loudly, his voice full of mockery. "Little Mr. Perfect and his perfect garden. You really think this boring setup does the neighborhood justice?" Tom didn't flinch. He didn't even glance in their direction. He calmly continued trimming his hedges, his focus unbroken. Clay's grin faltered for a split second before it turned sharper. He wasn't used to being ignored, and Tom's indifference irked him. "All right, Grandpa," Clay sneered, leaning against the fence. "If you won't fix it, we'll give it some flair." One of the gang members, a wiry man with tattoos snaking up his arms, pulled out a can of spray paint. The hiss of the nozzle cut through the air as he began scrawling graffiti across Tom's immaculate white wall. "What do you think, old man?" the tattooed man jeered, taking a step back to admire his messy work. "Looks better already, huh?" Inside their houses, neighbors peeked nervously from behind curtains, their faces pale. They knew the gang by reputation and feared the consequences of speaking out. Tom paused mid-snip and set his shears down carefully on the fence. Finally, he turned to face the gang, his eyes calm and steady, like the still surface of a lake before a storm. "Are you done?" he asked quietly, his voice so even and nonchalant that it seemed to confuse the men for a moment. Clay let out a bark of laughter, though it sounded forced. "Done? Oh, old man, we're just getting started." The rest of the gang chuckled as they began planning their next act of vandalism, completely unaware that Tom was no ordinary retiree. The chapter ended with Tom standing firm, unbothered, while the gang continued their antics. The neighborhood watched in silent dread, unaware that this seemingly calm man held secrets that would soon shift the balance of power in a way no one could have imagined. The hiss of a second spray can pierced the air as another gang member eagerly joined the vandalism. This time, the graffiti was bolder and nastier, sloppily scrawled insults framing a large, crudely drawn skull in the center of Tom's once pristine wall. The gang laughed uproariously, their voices echoing down the quiet suburban street. Clay, the self-appointed ringleader, leaned back and admired the growing mural with an exaggerated grin. "Not bad, huh? Really brings some life to this dull little house," he quipped, turning to Tom. "What do you think, old-timer? Speechless?" Tom stood motionless, hands resting on the fence, watching with an air of unsettling calm. His silence clearly irked Clay, who puffed up his chest and stomped over to a metal trash can near the edge of the yard. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue?" He sneered, delivering a sharp kick to the can. It clattered noisily across the pavement, spilling its neat contents. The other bikers roared with laughter, spurred on by Clay's antics. Emboldened, one of them, a wiry man with a patchy beard, began stomping through Tom's flower beds, crushing bright blooms under his heavy boots. "Oh, these flowers were ugly anyway," the man jeered, uprooting a daisy and tossing it aside like a trophy. Another biker, taller and bulkier than the rest, sauntered over to the flagpole, looking it up and down with a smirk. "Nice flag," he said mockingly. "Real patriotic. Too bad it's wasted on a guy like you." Before Tom could respond, not that he seemed inclined to, the man turned his attention to a small, neatly polished plaque by the door. It read, "Patriot of the Year, 2005. "Patriot of the Year?" the biker read aloud with a laugh. "Seriously? Looks like your glory days are long gone, old man." With a swift motion, he ripped the plaque from its mount and tossed it over his shoulder, where it landed with a sharp crack against the pavement. The noise startled a few neighbors peering nervously from behind their curtains, but none dared step outside. Clay, reveling in the chaos, strode back toward Tom with a wide grin. "Patriot, huh? Looks like you're just another washed-up has-been now," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. Tom, however, didn't so much as blink. He remained perfectly still, his gaze steady and unbothered, as if he were watching a poorly rehearsed play. His silence wasn't just unnerving, it was infuriating. "Hey," Clay barked, stepping closer. "I'm talking to you." Tom finally shifted his stance, folding his arms and tilting his head ever so slightly. "Are you done yet?" he asked calmly, his voice soft but deliberate. The question hung in the air for a moment, its simplicity somehow louder than all the noise they had made. The gang exchanged uneasy glances, as if unsure whether they should feel insulted or intimidated. Clay's grin faltered, but he quickly masked it with bravado. "Oh, trust me, old man," he said, cracking his knuckles. "We're just getting started." The gang's laughter returned, though this time it felt more forced, as if they were trying to drown out the quiet intensity radiating from the man they thought was an easy target. Tom didn't move. His eyes briefly flicked to the wreckage around him, the crushed flowers, the defaced wall, the shattered plaque, and then back to Clay. "Good," he said simply, his lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. The chapter ended with Tom standing firm amidst the destruction, his unshakable composure a sharp contrast to the gang's frenzied energy. The neighbors, still watching from the safety of their homes, couldn't help but wonder, why wasn't Tom afraid? One of the bikers, the wiry guy with a mess of tattoos, gleefully shook a can of spray paint as he strutted toward Tom's front door. "All right, time to give this place a real masterpiece," he declared, pointing the nozzle directly at the door, the perfect white surface practically begging to be ruined. Tom, who had been standing by the fence with the same unsettling calm, finally moved. With measured steps, he approached the man, his shears forgotten on the ground. "Enough," Tom said, his voice steady and low. The word wasn't loud, but it cut through the chaos like a whip. The biker froze mid-spray. Slowly, the entire gang turned to face Tom, who now stood tall and unshakable, his gaze locked on the group. There was something in his eyes, sharp, commanding, that made even Clay hesitate for a fraction of a second. "What's this, Grandpa?" Clay said, forcing a laugh to cover his unease. "You finally decide to grow a spine?" Tom didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek phone, and tapped a number. The gang watched in bemusement as he held it to his ear. "Code 3, Tom said, his tone clipped and professional. "Deploy a team to my location. Immediate response required." Clay's laughter faltered, and his bravado wavered just slightly. Hey, what's this little show?" he asked, trying to sound amused, but failing to hide the nervous edge in his voice. "You calling your knitting club for backup?" Tom lowered the phone and glanced at Clay, one eyebrow raised. "Something like that," he said, his lips curving into the faintest hint of a smirk. The gang exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, the tallest of the bunch, muttered, "What's he playing at?" Before anyone could answer, the distant sound of engines approached, not the roaring chaos of motorcycles, but the smooth hum of high-performance vehicles. Within moments, 3 sleek black SUVs pulled up to the curb with military precision. The doors opened in unison, and out stepped a group of men in sharp suits, their movements crisp and purposeful. The air shifted. Gone was the carefree arrogance of the gang. It was replaced with palpable tension as the men approached. The tallest of them, a broad-shouldered figure with an authoritative stride, stopped in front of Tom and snapped a sharp salute. "Awaiting your orders, sir," the man said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of someone used to following high-stakes commands. Tom didn't blink. "Detain these individuals," he said, gesturing casually toward the gang. "They seem confused about federal property laws. Educate them." The bikers' faces drained of color. Whoa, hold up," Clay stammered, his swagger crumbling. "You're kidding, right? This is some kind of joke." Tom tilted his head, his expression calm yet cold. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The men in suits moved swiftly. One by one, the bikers were rounded up, their protests drowned out by the efficiency of the operation. The wiry guy with the spray can tried to make a run for it, but was intercepted in seconds. Hey, we didn't know," Clay blurted, his bravado completely replaced with panic. "We thought you were just some harmless old man," Tom finished for him, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You should learn to ask better questions before making assumptions." As the gang was lined up by the SUVs, Clay finally worked up the nerve to ask, "Who are you?" Tom stepped closer, his eyes locked on Clay's. "Tom Randall," he said simply, "former head of criminal intelligence, and as of this moment, the man responsible for ensuring you learn the meaning of accountability." The street was eerily quiet, save for the murmurs of neighbors who had now ventured out of their homes. Phones were out, recording every second of the gang's public humiliation. As the bikers were loaded into the SUVs, one of the agents leaned toward Tom. "Anything else, sir?" Tom glanced at his wrecked garden, the graffiti-covered wall, and the shattered plaque. "Send someone to clean this up," he said. Then, with a small smirk, he added, "and make sure the bill goes to them." The chapter ended with Tom standing in the midst of the chaos, calm and composed, while the bikers, now pale and panicked, were driven away. The neighbors began to cheer, and for the first time, they saw Tom not just as their friendly old neighbor, but as someone far more formidable. Clay's eyes darted to the side. His instincts screamed one thing: run. With a burst of adrenaline, he bolted toward the street, his heavy boots clunking against the pavement. But he didn't get far. One of the agents moved with the precision of a hawk, intercepting him in a matter of seconds. Clay let out a sharp yelp as he was spun around and pinned firmly by the agent's grip. His gang froze, their bravado now replaced with wide-eyed panic. One of them stammered, We didn't mean anything by it, just messing around." The lead agent calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge, holding it up for the group to see. The letters FBI gleamed under the sunlight, and the effect was immediate. The gang's faces turned as pale as the white walls they'd vandalized. "You're kidding, right?" Clay muttered, his voice shaky as he looked between the badge and Tom, who was now casually sipping coffee from a ceramic mug that read, "World's Best Neighbor." The wiry biker, his bravado completely gone, pointed at Tom and blurted, "Who the heck are you?" Tom took a slow sip of his coffee before lowering the mug and giving the man a calm, almost amused glance. "Tom Randall," he said evenly, "former head of criminal intelligence." The gang stared at him, their jaws practically hitting the ground. Clay sputtered, "You've got to be kidding me." Tom's smile widened slightly. "And it looks like your little art project will make a fine addition to the evidence file. Congratulations, you just made yourselves part of a federal case." The bikers exchanged frantic glances, their tough guy act now fully replaced with sheer terror. The agents got to work. Each biker was handed a bucket of soapy water and a scrub brush. The tallest one, who had earlier trampled Tom's flowers, let out a whiny groan. "You can't be serious. We're not doing this." Tom raised an eyebrow. "That's fine. The cleanup crew at the station loves overtime. I'm sure they'll also love asking why you thought vandalizing federal property was a good idea." The biker blinked, then snatched a scrub brush without another word. For the next 2 hours, the gang worked under the unyielding gaze of both the agents and Tom. They scrubbed every inch of graffiti from the walls, painfully aware of the growing crowd of neighbors. Phones were out, recording every humiliating second. At one point, Clay muttered something under his breath about stupid flowers as he begrudgingly replanted Tom's ruined garden. Tom, standing nearby with his coffee, tilted his head and quipped, "Careful now, those daisies are a little out of your league." The neighbors chuckled, and even one of the agents smirked. When the bikers finished, Sweat-drenched and thoroughly defeated, the agents made them line up in front of the house. The neighbors, who had now gathered in a small crowd, began clapping and cheering. One of the agents nodded to Tom. "Anything else, sir?" Tom surveyed the scene. The walls were clean, the garden restored, and the gang looked like a pack of soaked puppies. He gave a satisfied nod. "No, I think they've learned their lesson. Haven't you?" Clay gritted his teeth but managed a feeble, "Yes, sir." "Good." Tom took a step forward, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable weight. "Next time, choose your target more carefully. Not everyone's as patient as me." The crowd erupted in laughter, and one of the kids in the neighborhood, a wide-eyed boy clutching a small flag, ran up to Tom. "Mr. Randall, this is for you," he said, holding out the flag. Tom crouched down to accept it, his tough exterior softening for just a moment. "Thank you, son. I'll make sure it flies proud." As the SUVs drove the bikers away, the neighbors surrounded Tom, showering him with gratitude and admiration. For the first time, they saw their kind and helpful neighbor in a whole new light. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom stood in his garden, carefully securing the new flag on the pole. With his hedges neatly trimmed and the chaos of the day behind him, he finally returned to his peaceful routine. He glanced at the freshly cleaned walls, took a deep breath of the crisp evening air, and picked up his shears. "Back to work," he murmured with a small smile, ready for whatever the next day might bring.